Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome to my weekly live Q&A, episode 43. My name is Danny Segura. I am a mixed martial arts reporter for MMAJunkie.com. And yes, like I said, welcome to my weekly live Q&A where I answer all your questions regarding the combat sports world and much more. So I know I missed last week. I'm sorry about that, but I was super busy. I tried to make it up later in the week because I couldn't on Tuesday, and then I just got super busy. And this week I've been super busy as well, but I figured I'd get a video in here. So sorry for the date switch up, but hey, you know, we're here, right? So a lot going on, obviously, in the combat sports world. We are just days away from UFC 256 on Saturday, the last pay-per-view of the year. Then we're also coming off a UFC Vegas 16 card, which wasn't the best as far as name value, wasn't the biggest card, but it was certainly a fun card to watch. That was one of those cards where it was kind of sneaky good, and it was one of those cards where Dana White gets to say, you know, hey, I told you so. Like, you know, you have to wait and see and watch a card until you're able to judge it, right? Which I kind of get a little bit of that, but you know, there is certainly something to not having star power in these cards, right? And then on top of that, we have a bunch of news coming up with the UFC cutting or attempting to cut 60 fighters from their roster within, before 2020 is over. And as well as Anthony Rumble Johnson signing with Bellator. Yoel Romero got caught from the UFC. That was a pretty crazy news. I mean, there's so much going on. So a lot to get to. Again, I know I threw this video kind of late notice, so I apologize for the lack of heads up. But we do have a couple of questions on Twitter, so we'll get to those first. And then after that, we'll take over the YouTube live chat. So again, if you're watching this and you want to ask questions, you want to chat about whatever it is that you want to talk about, feel free to throw that on the YouTube live chat, and we'll get to it in a few minutes. All right. So let's do. I didn't get to cut these out, but let's tackle this first question by Michael Terrell, and he asks: does the loser of Ferguson Oliveira get cut from the UFC? So 60 cuts is a lot, but the UFC roster is quite big. I mean, when Dana White says it's overinflated, he's not kidding around. There is a ton of fighters, you know, and contractually, they have to give the fighters 3 fights or pay them for those 3 fights within a year, right? And given the amount of events that they put on, it's just not enough slots for all these fighters to meet their contractual needs, right? So certainly 60 cuts. I think we're going to see a lot of surprising names. I think obviously a very big one was Yoel Romero, and we can get into that later on. And you know, I did write a column about this on MMA Junkie, kind of talking about this new generation that was coming in through the Contender Series and kind of what the UFC is looking at, you know. And certainly I believe that the UFC is no longer interested in having all the best fighters in the world, but just the very best. Like, whoever are the very, very best, they want all of them. But as far as on a bigger scale, they're not that interested in maybe like the top 15s or something like that. They want the very best and fighters that promise to be just that. That's from what I've gathered with some of the recent cuts that they've done, right? Like, if they really wanted the best, they would have kept Jussier Formiga. But you and me, the hardcores, might care about a Jussier Formiga cut, but in the grand scheme of things, and you know, I'm not trying to be dismissive to Formiga in any way. I have a lot of respect for him. In fact, I like him very much as a fighter. You know, he's not really going to make a difference, right? Usually the people that pay for pay-per-views are not really gonna be too affected by a cut of that nature. But if you're really trying to keep the best, I mean, that guy is truly a ranked one of the best 125-pound fighters today. However, he's in his mid-30s. I believe he's 35, right? So how much promotional resources do you want to invest in someone that, you know, perhaps their ceiling is already met and then they're only going to be fighting for a few years? So back to the question here with Ferguson versus Oliveira. I don't think this is the case with Oliveira. Oliveira is obviously has some things going for him. One, he's young. I believe he's only 30 years old, which is crazy because it feels like he's been in the UFC for like 15 years. He's 31, actually. When was Okay, yeah, his birthday was October 17th, so he recently turned 31, and he's been fighting in the UFC since 2010, so a decade. Yeah, so he got into the sport when he was, or he got into the promotion when he was 21. So he's still fairly young. His ceiling's not quite met. Obviously, we've seen this crazy win streak that he's on. A lot of people think that he could maybe beat Tony Ferguson. And frankly, the idea of him potentially reaching a spot where he fights for the title is not all that crazy, keeping in mind how much evolution we've seen in his game and the fact that he's still young. So I think he still promises a lot. I don't suspect his contract is very expensive as well. Again, I don't think he's a newcomer in any sense of the way as far as contract goes. But, Tony Ferguson has been an interim champion, right? He's fought in pay-per-view main events. So and just in pay-per-views, he's competed in many pay-per-views and been planned to headline many pay-per-views, but unfortunately, he hasn't been able to get there, or his opponent hasn't been able to get there as well. So, as far as Charles Oliveira, I think he's good no matter what happens on Saturday night. Tony Ferguson, on the other hand, I suspect he'll be good because, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, the UFC is still very interested in keeping the very, very best, right? And Tony Ferguson is just that, right? He's not a top 10, nothing like that. He's literally a top 3, maybe top 2 in the UFC's lightweight division, right? So my hunch is that they keep him around. Yes, he's 36 years old, but he's still a very good fighter. He's still a fan-friendly fighter. I'm not going to say he's like the biggest draw in the world, but he's certainly a known fighter. I mean, he's been linked to some of the biggest stars in the sport, right? Khabib, how many times? 5 bouts. Even Conor McGregor, the whole McNuggets thing. Like, the guy is popular. People know who he is. In fact, some of you may know this, some of you may not, but he pretty much got wrecked by Ferguson last night at the media day. I asked him a question, and basically he called me a mother effer and kind of interrupted me, and he wasn't really pleased with what I asked him. And that's just to say that a lot of people have reached out to me since. A lot of like people that I know that are casual MMA fans, people that I grew up with, that I went to high school with, college, that just watch the big ones, and they know who Tony Ferguson is. So like he's a well-known dude. So I think these two will be fine no matter what's the result on Saturday night. I think, the type of profile that might be at risk for getting cut, that's not the type of profile that Tony Ferguson or Charles Oliveira meet. So I think they should be good, Michael Taro. But back to the whole thing. I kind of get why he was a little upset. The question I asked him, I think he misunderstood what I was trying to say. In previous interviews, he said it tons of times. He wanted to fight Charles Oliveira because he's a staple in the UFC. He's a proven contender there, right? He's climbed up the rankings, whereas Chandler have never fought in the UFC, although he's a Bellator champion. It seemed that Ferguson was kind of discarding that, or at least that's my interpretation, just because he didn't want to fight Chandler, as far as, not that he wasn't down to get in the fight with him, but just because he wanted somebody higher ranked, and he actually thought Charles Oliveira was just a better name for him, which is an interesting question, because some might argue that Chandler, with all the pop that he got with, his switch from Bellator to the UFC, right, being a champion in another promotion, I mean, it just feels like that kind of would have been, as far as promotion, a bigger bout, in my opinion, than the Oliveira one. So I was genuinely curious, like, hey, what do you see here that you rather fight? That should have been the word that I should have used. Rather fight Oliveira over Michael Chandler. He kind of took it as like I was saying that he was dodging Michael Chandler, but obviously that's not the case. We know that Tony Ferguson dodges nobody, even if it costs him a title shot, right? A fight for the belt, he'll take a fight. I mean, we saw that at UFC 249. And you guys know, I mean, the people that have been tuning into these live Q&As that I've been doing for quite some time, and even my previous work, or my work that I've done at MMA Junkie, and even with my former employer, MMA Fighting, like I've always been a huge fan of Tony Ferguson. I always give him the most respect ever. I think out of all the media members, I'm like the biggest Tony Ferguson stan, just because I think he is the uncrowned champion of the UFC lightweight division. And despite him not having an undisputed belt, I do think historically he is one of the best lightweights to ever compete at 155 pounds. Certainly top 5. You could make the case maybe top 3. Obviously, I think Khabib's number 1. would I rank him above Conor? I don't know. That's an interesting question, but like certainly a top 3. I mean, you guys know I have so much respect for Tony Ferguson, so I was kind of surprised that he blew up on me a little bit, but after watching it back, I think it was a misunderstanding. Some people were like, yeah, he shouldn't have blown up on you. I thought you were being really nice. Some others were like, yo, you suck. Ask better questions. I think it's a little bit of both. I think I could have done a little better job at phrasing that question. But at the same time, I also feel like he might have taken it wrong because certainly other people saw it and didn't think that it was bad, that it was like a bad question or anything like that. And like I said, this was on the basis that he was saying constantly in many interviews and in the media and even on Twitter that he wanted to fight Charles Oliveira and not Chandler because he thought just Oliveira brought a lot more as far as a reward if you were to beat him, right? So anyways, just kind of wanted to address that real quick because, dude, my mentions have been blowing up. Especially on Twitter, like literally people on Instagram, like people getting out of their way to like send me stuff. Pretty funny there. Let's see here. A couple more Twitter questions and then we'll switch things over to the YouTube live chat again. If you want to pop in some questions and talk about whatever, MMA, maybe not MMA, just throw that on the YouTube live chat and I'll get to it in a few minutes here. All right. Passive Wokeness wants to know, where do you want to see Yoel end up and what weight class? So this is a good question. For whatever reason, I actually thought Yoel Romero, when the news was first announced, I tweeted something like, this has to be like the biggest free agent of 2020 by far. I mean, it's got to be between him or Michael Chandler. Chandler has a little bit more prestige because he was an actual undisputed champion. Yoel was not, although you can make a case that he should be. But the facts are the facts, right? But certainly Yoel has been in many big UFC pay-per-views, not only headlining act, but co-main event and just other placements around the pay-per-view main card. And he just had a lot more exposure. I mean, he's had a few things go viral. I mean, that crazy workout that he once had. I forgot what fight I think that might have been the Wyman fight. I think blew up. I mean, over at MMA Junkie, I think just blew up. And we recently brought it back to light, with the news that Romero is out of the UFC. And again, that thing keeps blowing up. Also that ESPN interview where he's like, if you believe or whatever, where he was like very motivating and inspiring. I mean, he's a big star. I mean, I wouldn't say he's like Conor McGregor level, but he's well known. People know who he is. And Chandler, maybe not so much. So anyways, I think he's the biggest free agent in 2020. And I really thought that a lot of promotions were going to be fighting over his services, right? Certainly Bellator, I think he would have been a perfect fit for Bellator. I think Bellator's kind of fed up, from what I gather, of getting these like name values that no longer have gas in the tank. And I totally get that. And that's a big criticism that we've seen about Bellator, right? So like Anderson Silva, I get that. Like he's a huge name, but at the same time, like he's like not... Anderson Silva, I think he's like still like a top 20 middleweight, maybe top 25, but certainly not anywhere close to a top 10 or a top 5 or anything like that. Romero is easily a top 3 middleweight, in my opinion, in the world. Shit, a lot of people think he should be champion. I certainly thought he beat Israel Adesanya in his last bout back in March. I was there in person. And the second Robert Whittaker fight, I thought he won. I thought he won the Paulo Costa fight as well. And but yeah, for whatever reason, he's just in these weird close fights, and he always ends up in the losing end. So I thought Bellator would really pick him up because, yes, he's old, but really, he's got a lot of mileage left. Like that's a guy that could easily compete, maybe give you 3 good years, maybe 4, right? Depending on how you matchmake him and how often he fights. And hopefully, he doesn't sustain any injuries, which he's never really an injury-prone guy anyways. But yeah, they didn't want him. PFL didn't want him as well. So, those are 2 big promotions that have been acquiring big talent as of late. So Mm, yeah, in my opinion, I think Bellator would be a perfect move. I know they said no, but they kind of always said as well. Speaking with my colleague Nolan King, that the conversation is always open. That you never know with these things, but it kind of seems like a no. But never say never, right? But ideally, I think light heavyweight at Bellator, that would have been a lot of fun. Forget about middleweight. I think he's had a few issues making the weight. He's getting older. Dude, in this stage of your career, you're out of the UFC. Just have fun. Have fun, be healthy, get money, and that's it. So I think light heavyweight would have been fun for him. There's a lot of fun matchups. Um and that would boost the argument of Bellator potentially having the best 205-pound division, which they certainly have a very good one. Add Yoel Romero to that, and all of a sudden, you got a party. So I think that to me is the best move. Um, Light heavyweight at Bellator. And then following that, I think the PFL kind of makes sense given his style, but at the same time, it's like, dude, if you're going to fight at 185, like, you're going to have to make weight a lot, because if you win the tournament, you easily fight 5 times a year. So I don't know if he wants to be that active, so I don't know if that makes sense for him. Certainly, Ryzen would be a lot of fun. I mean, Ryzen is all about the freak shows, and they're all in for that gimmick. And Yoel Romero would be an amazing and very interesting ingredient to freak shows and sort of that type of fights, where they just put him against a giant guy, or like a super tall, lanky dude or something. I don't know. But certainly at Ryzen, with soccer kicks and all that, like, that dude would just be a complete beast. So that would be fun. So I think number one, it would be Bellator. Number two for me would be Ryzen, a home for Yoel Romero. Weight class 205. But yeah, very, very surprising that that Bellator and PFL weren't interested in his services. Yes, he's old, but it don't matter. What matters is what's under the hood. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you buy a 2005 car, but it's never been driven, like, that thing's new, basically. Maybe a few things you got to change, like the battery and stuff like that. But for the most part, that car will run just fine, right? So yeah, weird there. That was a weird one, but I have a feeling he's gonna end up somewhere big. Even bare knuckle, man. Like, could you imagine Joel in bare knuckle? Like, trying to, like, you gotta fight Yoel Romero in bare knuckle. Like, and I'm not a fan of bare knuckle FC, but that would get me watching. That would get me watching, to be quite honest. But yeah, there are other promotions I would rather see him end up in before that one. All right, last question on Twitter by A Pass of Wokeness, and then we'll take things over to the YouTube live chat. He says, Justin wants the winner of Conor versus Dustin, the hip injury champion for the belt. The biggest Dustin Poirier hater. Obviously, losers should never get instant title shot. Who should he fight? Chandler only left. Yeah, I don't like Justin against the winner of Conor versus Dustin. I mean, he's just coming off a pretty bad defeat. I mean, he got slept by Khabib. Granted, it's Khabib. You could do that to a lot of people. But still, look at what Dustin Poirier had to do. Like, he lost badly to Khabib. He was also choked, right? And then he ended up fighting an up-and-comer. Up-and-comer contender, I would say. He's not really a prospect, but he fought Dan Hooker, a guy whose trajectory was going up and trying to break into the elite. I think that's kind of the type of matchup that he should be in. If things would have gone the way I imagine they would have, and I would have liked, Ferguson would have fought Chandler, and I think a fight with Charles Oliveira, Justin versus Charles, I think that would have been fantastic. Makes perfect sense, right? So you can scratch Charles Oliveira from that equation. And look, even wouldn't be like all that bad, to be honest. Let's say if Charles were to get past Tony Ferguson, like a fight with Justin, at that point, like, it would have put Charles in like a crazy, crazy win streak. I think he's like on a 7-fight win streak. So, he'd be 8-0, right? And then put him against Justin. It would kind of seem a little bit cruel. At that point, it would kind of seem like, hey, you did your work. You deserve a title shot. But at the same time, we know how clogged up that division is. So maybe that wouldn't make all that much sense. Let me quickly pull up the UFC rankings and see who's available for Justin Gage. I think you might be right, A Pass of Wokeness. I think Chandler might be the only solution here. Let's see. Men's lightweight. RDA is in need of a dance partner as well, so keep him in the mix. Yeah, it's a tough one. I think a lot of things are going to shake out in the coming months, so we'll see. I think this conversation will be much different in a few months, given some of the big results that are coming up. So yeah, we'll see. I think maybe Charles, or I think maybe RDA. Chandler wouldn't be a bad option as well. I think the Chandler fight would actually be quite exciting. Obviously, both guys always bring it. They have a good wrestling base as well. I think that'd be interesting. But he's definitely got options. Ask me this in like 3 weeks towards the end of the year, and I'll have a better answer for you. All right. Taking questions about the YouTube live stuff in the YouTube live chat. So again, if you want to ask stuff, feel free. Jesus, my mouth is so. I got cotton mouth right now. Feel free to throw whatever you want, and I'll get to it in just a few minutes. Immigrant mentality, Miocic, Stiopic. He says, could Hamzat beat Gyno Bender? By that, I'm assuming you're referring to Style Bender. Funny. Let's see. No, I don't think so. I mean, let's see what he does against Leon Edwards in February. I think that's the plan. Obviously, Leon had to pull out. Very bad luck. I think Leon, out of all the fighters we've seen, actually, no, I take that back. But Leon certainly has had a pretty bad 2020. In fact, he hasn't fought since summer of 2019, so it's been quite a while. And the plan is to get that Hamzat fight rebooked for February, from what I read up. And if that's the case, then let's wait and see what happens with that. I think that's a big fight for Hamzat because obviously he's got all this hype. And frankly, like, it's a terrible fight for Leon. Like, Leon shouldn't be fighting Hamzat. He deserves better. I think he should be fighting Wonderboy. But for some reason, he didn't want to fight Wonderboy. But for Leon, in my opinion, is not a good fight. Now, for Hamzat, I think in the UFC, which, they wanted to make that bout, I think it's a perfect fight because you capitalize on this huge momentum that Hamzat is bringing. Like, the guy's just blown up. He had like 60,000 followers on Instagram when he first signed with the UFC like a few months ago. And I think now he has like 500,000. So pretty crazy. The amount of growth he's had as far as his popularity in just a short amount of time. Obviously, he's done pretty crazy things to go with it, right? From performances to taking fights on very, very short notice, etc. So from the Hamzat and UFC point, it's a great fight because it's, you just can't lose. If you lose to Leon, it's like, all right, like, he literally fought a top 3 in the world. So a lot of people would lose to him. So, no harm there. And if you win, like, dude, you got the next, the next big thing. You got the next superstar right there. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's got the hype, and all of a sudden, with a win over Leon Edwards, you got legitimacy. He becomes legitimate. And I think that's what's haunting him right now. A lot of the haters are like, he's not legit. And I'm not saying he's not, but I agree that there should be some skepticism because we haven't seen him against very good opposition. I think the best opposition he's fought was Gerald Meerschaert, who is good, but certainly not a top 5 fighter in any division. So let's see what happens there. I think that's going to be a big moment. I think it's going to be a big moment that's going to tell us a lot about Hamzat. If he goes out there and just demolishes Leon Edwards, then I would still favor Adesanya in a fight, but like, you have to let your imagination run loose at that point because, I mean, he just beat Leon Edwards, a top 3 in the world, right? So that'd be certainly interesting. So I would say no. I would say no to answer your question. Immigrant mentality, steel pick, but I would say no, but let's wait and see what happens with Leon. I might have I think that might change a tad depending on his performance against Leon. All right, we got one more. And he says, how would Davison do a bantamweight against guys like Peter Yan, Sterling, Sanhagen, O'Malley, etc.? I think he would do quite well. I think he would do very well. I think he'd be a top 5 for sure, possibly champion. Davison is weird because he's like one of these guys that kind of like basically pretty much like a John Lineker, right? Whose power just carries over. Like even like a Jessica Andrade, like no matter what weight class she competes at, even if Jessica Andrade decides to compete at 145, like completely outsized by anyone, like her power could match the power of a lot of ladies in that division. In fact, maybe even surpass it. Like there is just a weird thing about, I don't know, I don't even know if it's just like their structure or what it is about these certain fighters that their power can carry over through any division. Now, there's some that like, yeah, they can still have power in a weight class above this and that, but there are some others that they're just basically like a universal remote. Like they just work anywhere. So I think Davison is one of those fighters. I think if he goes up to 135, yes, he'd be fighting guys that are 10 pounds heavier, but he'd still be one of the hardest hitting fighters in that division. Now, I know I compared him a few minutes to John Lineker. I think power wise, that's a fair comparison. However, from a limitation standpoint, I don't think it is. Lineker had the size. He was just too thick, but he had the size of a flyweight. Whereas Davidson, I think if he were to move up to 135, obviously he would get a little thicker just because he's eating a little more and probably lifting a little more. But his frame sort of fits a bantamweight frame. Like he wouldn't be outsized. He wouldn't look much smaller than any other bantamweight in the division. Now, he might not be the biggest, but you wouldn't look at him and label him as a small bantamweight. Now, he really enjoys to fight big. That's one advantage he gets at 125, just having that size advantage, that weight advantage. So, that could certainly mess with his style at 135. He would be less dominant on that end, but he wouldn't get thrown around. I don't suspect he would. But yeah, great question. I do think he does well, and I do think he has a shot of becoming champion at 135. Davison is really underrated, man. He's really underrated. He seems like a wild man, and he is, but within all that wildness, he's very, very technical and very dangerous, like everywhere. Like the dude can knock you out, and the dude has also serious ground skills. Like he can submit you all kinds of way. Armbar. I mean, you saw him go for that crazy knee bar against Alex Perez. Now, it didn't work, but eventually he got a guillotine choke. Sleeping Joseph Benavidez, right? Like, that's a guy that's like never been submitted. That's a guy who's been known to have great guillotine chokes, obviously training at Team Alpha Male when he began. And has Joseph Benavidez ever been submitted besides Davison Figueiredo tapping him or putting him to sleep? I don't think so. Let me pull that up. I really don't think so. Oh, no, he does have 4 submission losses. 1 to Davison. And, wait, no, he doesn't. Yeah, no, he only has 1. I was reading the wrong stat. My bad. He only has 1 submission loss. Think about that. In, how many fights has, in over 30 fights, over 35 fights. So pretty crazy. The guy's a threat everywhere. That's why this fight with Brandon Moreno is very interesting. I think Moreno, I think rightfully so, Davison should be the favorite, and this is coming from a guy that, I constantly interview Brandon Moreno and I have a good relationship with him. So I'm really not trying to be biased. But I think even though Davison should be the favorite just because he has the better body of work and, he's the champion and he's proven a lot when he steps in there, I think out of everyone at 125 pounds, Moreno gives him the toughest fight. Moreno, people forget, but like Moreno has always talked about his boxing, and I see a lot of American analysts, pundits, experts, journalists, whatever you want to call them, all of the above, make this mistake where they just assume, he's Mexican, he's got great boxing, and he's tough. And certainly a lot of Mexicans have great boxing and are tough, but there's a lot of Mexicans that are not tough either. That's like saying like every single Brazilian is just a great grappler and they don't really know much striking. No, you look at a guy like Vanderlei, like not much jiu-jitsu while striking. You look at a guy like Thiago Alves, Brazilian, very good striking, not much jiu-jitsu, right? So it's you can't just, there's certainly like a common theme, but you can't just put everyone in that box. And Moreno, if people don't remember, Moreno got good with his hands late, in the sense of he got good with his hands throughout his UFC career. If you look at those early fights, I mean, his first UFC fight, he won it by submitting Louis Smolka. Even prior to that, if you look at his trajectory, it was really his wrestling and jiu-jitsu that got him places, that got him to the Ultimate Fighter, frankly. So he's a very, very good grappler. And I think Davidson's going to have a tough time submitting that guy because he's just really good on the ground. And on the feet, you know, Brandon is a bit faster, I think, and he's got great combinations and great punches. The only area where I would say Davidson beats him is the power, right? And, you know, he can always put the lights out on anybody. But I don't even think Brandon Moreno's been stopped. I mean, the guy's just super tough. So yeah, it's an interesting fight. But anyways, I know I kind of went on a rant here, but I think Deiveson Figueiredo would do fantastic at 135, potentially become champion. The guy's very good. Very, very good. He's wild, but he's very good. Thoughts on the COVID vaccine? Do you plan on getting it? And how will this help the MMA world? Well, it would help the entire world. So MMA world included. You know, like one of the reasons why I don't go out to do interviews, even though there are fighters that live around the area. You know, I'm in South Florida as of now. I don't know, because you never know. What if I catch COVID and then I give COVID to one of them, and like you just never know anything, right? And then, you know, a bout gets canceled, or I'm responsible for a COVID outbreak in a gym or something, even though I've been taking care of myself, obviously, and wearing masks and all that. But, you know, you just still never know. So it's just best not to. Yeah, so with a vaccine, you'd be able to travel. You'd be able to do so much more things, right? Fighters, I mean, a vaccine would basically eliminate everything about all the concerns about potentially getting COVID with the travel, right? You won't really have to do a bubble if everyone's vaccinated. Now it would be a requirement. I assume the commissions would require you a COVID vaccine. Now I think that'd be part of the requirements in the future about, you know, if you're going to step in the ring, you better have a COVID vaccine probably. But yeah, and do I plan on getting it? Yeah, sure. I'll probably be one of the last people to get it, just because I'm literally in probably one of the last groups that is least at risk. I don't have any underlying health conditions. I'm not an elderly. I'm not over 60. I am not a first responder. I'm also not essential. I'm not essential. I don't work at a supermarket, etc. So, you know, I'm not a police officer. So I'm probably going to be one of the last people to get it, which is kind of good. I didn't want to be the first one. Why? I don't know. You just, I don't know. With anything, I'm sure it's safe. They wouldn't bring it out if it wasn't. But like, you know, you still always have like these little fears and stuff. Obviously, it's a brand new vaccine, the fastest vaccine ever created in the history of mankind. So, yeah, I'll probably be one of the last people to get it. I don't know when, but from what I read up here in the U.S., like, I think the plans to have it roll out by, I think like March next year, you know, start with, you know, the elderly at homes and stuff like that. Then first responders, you know, doctors, nurses, all that. Then the people, you know, over 60, and then, you know, it keeps trickling down. So I think probably like summer, late summer, early fall, I assume I'd be getting it. Hopefully, if it all goes well. I don't know. Let's see here. Back at it again. Conor versus Poirier for the vacant belt, or Gaethje versus Chandler. Yes, we got to find out what's happening with Khabib, man. Khabib is saying, I'm retired. And Dana's like saying, nope, no, you're not. We're keeping you champion. So it's like with John Jones, when he was like, he was like fairly teasing about moving up. They're like, all right, yep, vacated. Same thing with Henry Cejudo, where he retired, where it was very quick. You know, they were very quick to move on. We need to see something. I mean, Khabib needs to make up his mind. We'll see what happens. Obviously, give the man some time, but I think in the meantime, it wouldn't hurt to like maybe make Conor versus Poirier for the interim title, and you know, if Khabib doesn't come back, then you promote the interim to the undisputed. I think that makes sense. But if not, you're eliminating a contender easily right there with Connor and Dustin Poirier. But that's if Poirier loses. Connor, you can never eliminate him fully from contendership status. It just doesn't happen with him. All right, let's see here. Well, what about Till versus Marvin Vittori or Till versus Cannonier? I actually like Marvin Vittori versus Paulo Costa. I think that makes a lot of sense. Till's coming off a loss, right? To Whitaker. So look, even if they do the Jack Hermanson fight, the one that was supposed to happen, last weekend, I wouldn't hate that because then both fighters are coming off losses. That'd be kind of fun. And I think Jack Hermanson's stock rose up, but I think he suffered some sort of injury, whether it was a broken foot or something like that. So I think he'd probably be out for a bit. So I'm not even sure the extent of Darren Till's injury as well. So we'll see when he potentially returns. But let's say like Kevin Holland this weekend, for example, just steamrolls over Jacare, which is possible. Kevin Holland versus Darren Till, that'd be a lot of fun. I'd be into that for sure. Vittori, I think leave him to Paulo Costa. I think that's the move. And then if he wins, give him a title shot. And then Cannonier, I think Cannonier is out for a while, if I'm not mistaken. We'll see. All right, let's see. Could Little Pitbull from Bellator beat Volkanovski? He could, I think so. I think I'd favor Volkanovski, but with the power that Pitbull has, like you can never, and the technique as well. Don't forget about that. You can't rule him out of a fight, and he's also got submissions as well. So he'd actually be a very interesting matchup for Volkanovski. I'd still pick Volkanovski. I think he could outsmart him and just stay on the outside like he did with Holloway, land leg kicks, counter punch, and avoid the big shots and get away with a good decision win. I think that'd be my bet, but you can't rule out Pitbull connecting or getting a sub. You can't rule that out. All right, I'll answer a few more and get out. Let's see here. Jorge Masvidal should fight Khabib. It'll be a good spectacle, and if Khabib wins, he retires clean. I coached Jorge. It would be an awesome fight. It would be a big fight. It would be a huge fight. But from a styles perspective, given what we saw against Kamaru Usman and some other, heavy grapplers like Damian Maia, I think it'd actually be a pretty bad stylistic matchup for Jorge. Granted, Jorge would be the bigger man, but at the same time, Jorge has never really been a big welterweight. Remember, he is a former lightweight. So I actually don't like that fight. I think it would be a big fight. I think the build-up would be interesting, all that stuff. But from a styles perspective, and, they're in different divisions, I wouldn't like those two matched up. I think Jorge should fight Colby. I think that's the obvious one. They got the beef. It'd be a huge fight. It makes sense for the division. And Khabib, if he returns, I'd like to see him either... I think this is impossible, but Khabib only has 3 title defenses. You also got to keep in mind who he beat to get to the top and also the level that currently exists at 155 pounds, right? So that win streak is very impressive. Ideally, I'd love to see him stick around for many years just because he's still young. I think he could be elite 2 more years easily and extend a nice, long win streak as far as title defenses goes. I think that'd be a lot of fun, but that's not going to happen. I think he just has 1 in. That's it. If he comes back. So he's doing 30-0, and that's it. That's, of course, if he decides to return, which is a big if. And if that's the case, I either want to see him defend his belt against Conor McGregor in a rematch just because, again, F it, why not? Makes sense for the division. Some bad blood. Big money fight. But I wouldn't hate the GSP one. I know some people aren't on board with that, but if he's going to come back and doesn't want to defend his belt, if he's really done and he just wants a super fight, heck, just do it with GSP. GSP is looking for the same thing, just a one-off test himself against one of the best in the world and in the history of the lightweight division. So why not? I think the GSP one makes a lot of sense. That's the route that I would go. or how can I dare forget even Tony Ferguson? I think that's stylistically, I think that's my favorite matchup. Ferguson versus Khabib. I think that's just a fantastic fight. But at this point, I really doubt it happens. But truly a shame. If you ask me what's the biggest shame of all time in mixed martial arts, it'd be that we didn't get to see Ferguson versus Khabib. Now, never say never, right? Ferguson is still an active fighter. Khabib, kind of. But the chances look very, very slim at this point, sadly. Big muscly pervert. Okay. Don't dwell on that question for sure. Was perfectly normal. Tony seems to be in a weird place mentally. When I was going through all the interviews, yeah, he seemed very, very sad. I felt bad a little bit in a sense. And look, he has gone through a tough run. I mean, and this is when like people, I think this is one of the best examples when you realize like MMA is not really a sport. Like it is, but there's so much more to it, and there's so many other factors and elements to it. If it really was a sporting event, a sporting league, and not promotion, Tony Ferguson would have fought for the belt, undisputed belt, years ago. But it's not. There's politics. There's so many other things involved. There's luck as well. Let's not forget. It wasn't just the UFC making certain decisions that kind of put him in a bad spot, but also, Khabib was forced out of a fight, right, due to weight cutting issues. Ferguson got injured as well. There are so many moving pieces to that. A guy like, the one and only Conor McGregor's in that division, which disrupts everything. Imagine if Conor McGregor was like a 205er or a middleweight. Like Ferguson, odds are he probably would have fought for the belt. But yeah, you got to feel for the guy because clearly, like, he's 36 years old. I'm sure, I have a feeling, and again, we would only see this on Saturday night, but I have a feeling that we'll see the Tony Ferguson of old. I don't think he's washed, and I don't think the beating that Justin Gage gave him, which was a bad one, kind of changed him in any way. Now, that could be true, though. We'll find out on Saturday. But I suspect we'll get, I think best case scenario, right? We'll get a vintage Tony Ferguson. But even best case scenario, keeping in mind the wars that he's been in and the fact that he's 36 years old, you just got to assume that, he's not in the sport for, 10 more years like some of these other younger fighters. Like, he's towards the end of it. And he was the best, or he is one of the best, right? So if he ever retires and ever fights for the undisputed, I hope he doesn't dwell too much on that because, again, he has the case to be like, dude, I should have been there, and he should have. And look, maybe I would have defeated Khabib, and maybe I was that guy, and maybe I would have defended the belt. And then there's all these what ifs, and those are valid because he really is one of the best ever. So I feel that, but at the same time, it's like, yo, how many careers have we seen? Look at Michael Bisping, right? Like, if you don't give up hope and you stay grinding and you're getting good results, like the possibilities are endless. Even though they could be slim, there's still possibilities out there. So never say never on him getting his hands on a undisputed belt. But he feels that way, or at least from his comments that day, and it kind of sucks. It sucks because I'm a fan of Ferguson, of his style, and I've said it many times before. I think he deserves better, to be quite honest. You did a good job. Some of these athletes have to be professionals. I think you did a great job, and you did awesome job. More guys like you in the MMA community. Yeah, again, I'm not like overthinking this whole Tony Ferguson thing. I just want to address it because I'm not kidding. Like, a lot of people till this day are like sending me messages. Tons of messages about this, which is crazy. Some were like, again, much like the messages I'm reading now. Some were actually like, you're trash, which I find funny. But yeah, no, I do admit though that I could have framed that question a little better. But at the same time, it's virtual, right? They can't see me. For those that don't know, the virtual media days, we use this platform, the media, and we sign in. We can look at the fighter, but they can't look at us. They just stare into a camera, just how I am doing now. So it's a little bit awkward. it's a little less natural. You know, there's a lag a little bit, obviously, through the internet. So there's a lot of things you don't read that you otherwise would in person. You know, so I think that didn't help. Also, he's weight cutting, right? Also, it's Tony, right? It's not the first time he's had that sort of situation. And also, in my part, you know, you gotta call it how it is. I think I could have framed my question a tad better. Danny, did Luke ever give you a shout out for your channel? He has multiple times. Yeah, he's mentioned me on his YouTube channel. In fact, one time I remember I had to turn emails off because like I started getting a bunch of email notifications like, oh, so and so subscribe to your channel, so and so, and I'm like, what the. And I hadn't done a video. I think I do these on Tuesdays usually. Maybe it was like deeper into the week, so I'm like, okay, that's random. Maybe YouTube algorithm picked up one of my videos, and for some reason, it's blowing up. And I was like, oh no, that wasn't the case either. And then I watch Luke's content. I really like it. I think he's one of the best. I think he's the best ever in MMA media. I think he does a fantastic job. And obviously he's also a friend of mine. And then I ended up watching one of his videos. I think it was on a Friday when he was doing those live chats on his personal YouTube channel, and he gave me a small shout out, and yeah, just got a bunch of subscribers from that. So occasionally he will. I think when people bring it up or whenever, I always appreciate them. They're nice to get more subs for sure. Let's hear. Could Romero destroy Ryan Bader in Bellator? Potentially. I'd love to find out. Sign him. Let's see. Nice shirt, Danny. Thank you. What's next for Mike Perry? I think we'll see him in the UFC. I don't think he's going anywhere. I think he's got to go on a pretty bad losing streak, and he's looking good while losing. Like that fight against Means. Now, if you want to drop him from the roster from other outside factors, I understand that. Certainly, he's hasn't had good headlines in the media, and there hasn't been a lot of good things from his part outside of fighting. But if he manages to stay out of trouble, and he's an exciting fighter, loses some, wins some, and kind of maintains this status, there's a place for that in the UFC. You have Mike Perry is the type of fighter that the UFC likes styles wise. A guy that moves forward, a guy that doesn't care who he fights, a guy that fights till the very end, goes for the knockout, goes for the finish. So he has a place there. Could TJ become champ again? I don't know. I would have to wait and see how he looks in a comeback. I would say so, but I think the division that he left at 135 is just so much better now. And there's so many young guys that it's going to be tough for him. He hasn't fought in 2 years. I believe he's probably like 34, 33. So keep that in mind. Let me look this up. He is, Dillashaw is 34, man. That's pretty old for a bantamweight, But again, we've seen some guys again, we're just talking about Romero. There are certain guys that are able to stay very athletic and very strong and very game from a physical standpoint deep into their career. So TJ could be one of those, one of those fighters. And keep in mind, he also has fantastic technique. Two things that I'm curious to see about. What the layoff did to him. 3, actually. What the layoff did to him. How he matches up against the new crop of bantamweights that we're seeing. Because the division has changed. Period. From the time that he was competing, that division in the last 2 years is no longer the same division. That division went from being kind of okay, good, to being the best division in the UFC, period. And then on top of that, and this is no jab at him or anything like that. These are just facts. I mean, he admitted taking EPO. Now, these are allegations. Nothing proven here. So I'm just making sure I'm, dividing one from the other. Certainly for that Henry Cejudo fight, he was an EPO. That's a fact. He popped. He admitted it. Now, we don't know about the other fights. He's never said about his, PED use for previous fights. But we do have a video of Cody Garbrandt years back before they fought for the first time saying that he was an EPO. So, interesting stuff, right? Because he said it years before and then it ended up coming true, but we don't have proof that he actually fought for those previous fights in EPO. You can assume whatever you want. I'm just saying, as a media member, I cannot do that. But if that was the case, I'm curious to see how he competes without EPO, right? Because maybe he needed it. Maybe it was just a confidence thing, or maybe it was an actual physical thing. And we'll see a different fighter in that cage. I mean, how many fighters have we seen that they pop, right? Vitor Belfort or many others. They return, and they're not the same afterwards. That could be the case with TJ Dillashaw. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying it's a possibility, given the facts that we have, right? So I think that's a... I'm not saying anything crazy here. All right. Amy Wee, how long have you been paddleboarding? So yeah, I posted a picture recently on my Instagram. Follow me at Danny Segura TV, IG, Twitter. With my dog Hachiko, we were paddleboarding in Miami. That was actually my second time paddleboarding. I don't know if it's really easy or I'm good at it. Maybe it's a false sense of confidence there, but I never fall. I'm very good with my balance. I was able to get him on, and he was like walking around. He was a little scared at the beginning, and still able to keep my balance. And, after a while, he just chilled, and we just cruised down the beach, and it was nice. A lot of random people taking out their phones, old people like, zooming in, trying to film me and take pictures of me. That shit was weird. I was like, I don't know if to wave or what, but yeah. And then I realized I enjoy paddleboarding, so might do more of that. Master bullshit. I'm out. That's hilarious. Man. All right, I'll answer a couple more. Amy, is Tony Ferguson the type of guy to hold a grudge at next media day? No, I don't think so. And then the follow-up questions that I asked, he was pretty receptive and even gave me the, when I signed off, and I was very nice and very complimentary. I think it was just those seconds that he kind of took wrong. But I think, if you just look at the thing, I followed up with a few questions and it was all good. Plus, bro, I got receipts. You just got to look at previous videos about how much respect I've given Tony Ferguson in the past. So I think we're good. Plus, I don't think he knows me. Probably not. Let's see. This is the last one, and then I'm out of here. Terrence Levriette says, Does Corey Anderson have to worry now that Rumble has signed with Bellator? It took shine away from him. No, I don't think so. I don't think Corey Anderson is that type of guy. Like, if you look at some of his interviews, like, there's some guys that just don't work well with the UFC model. Like, they don't like the trash talk. They don't like being trash talk. They don't like doing it. They hate that, without it, they can't further their careers as much as they want. With it, they could, and they don't want to engage in it. Some do it, and then, changes their personality, and they don't like that. Like, you can see with some of the comments that he made when he was at Bellator that he was bothered by that kind of culture. And over at Bellator, like, he knows that, like, look, I can just clock in, clock out, and that's it. And then, I don't have to worry about anything else. I don't have to worry about social media. I don't have to worry about, selling fights and interviews. I'm just going to fight, and that's it. That's what he wants. So with that being said, I mean, he might certainly think Rumble is a dangerous fight for him, right? I mean, Rumble is a dangerous fight for anybody given his power. So maybe on that end, he's worried. Not worried in the sense of like he's scared or anything like that. But now, again, there's another threat in the division, right? But beyond like taking the shine, like, dude, he'll let Rumble take the shine. I don't really think Corey Anderson cares at all. In fact, I actually probably think Corey Anderson likes his chances against Rumble. We've seen Rumble fall to wrestlers. Corey Anderson just happens to be a pretty damn good wrestler. So yeah, dude, that division is interesting. That signing, that Rumble signing to Bellator, I think it's perfect. I think it makes a lot of sense. Really, really like it. I think it made, it's perfect for Rumble. It's perfect for Bellator. I think that I would like to see him at heavyweight, but overall, even at light heavyweight, I think he offers a lot of interesting things there. And we'll see how much he has left in the tank. But when he walked away from MMA, it looked like he had a lot left in him. And certainly this last few years, I mean, the guy still looks in shape. He trains every now and then. That power is never going to go away. I'm sure we're going to see some fun knockouts from Rumble. So, yeah, a lot of fun there. All right, so I'm going to sign off. I appreciate everybody that tuned in, everybody that submitted questions, also to the Super Chat. And, yeah, please remember, you can follow me everywhere at Danny Segura TV. That's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I need to start updating my Facebook a little more. And, yeah, give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share it. And I'll be back on Tuesday, most likely. Again, sorry for the late mix-ups, but I've been very, very busy. So, it's hard to stick to a schedule. But I think by next week, Tuesday, we should be in the clear. Sounds good? All right. Hope you guys enjoy the weekends, and I'll talk to you guys on Tuesday.